Chapter 1: The Daughter Who Never Left. I found out my family erased me from my mother's will in a quiet lawyer's office, not with shouting, not with tears, just a single sentence that told me I no longer belonged. My name is Marin, and for years I was the daughter who stayed, who cared, who held everything together while everyone else moved on. I didn't fight them that day. I didn't even raise my voice, because what they didn't know was that silence wasn't my weakness. It was the moment I started paying attention, and that decision would quietly change everything. I remember one afternoon in early fall when my mother insisted on baking, even though her hands shook too much to hold the bowl steady. Flour dusted the counter, the floor, her sweater. She laughed when it spilled, a soft, surprised laugh, and for a moment she looked like the woman I had grown up with. Then she stared at the oven as if she had never seen one before and asked me whose house we were in. I told her it was ours. I told her she was safe. I told her I was right there. Later that same week, Aaron sent an email about updating some accounts. Routine housekeeping, he said. He copied Paige and the financial advisor whose name I had never been given. My name was not on that email. I only saw it because it was forwarded to me by mistake, followed quickly by an apology and a reassurance that nothing needed my attention. That was the first time I felt something shift inside me. Not anger, not fear, just a quiet tightening, like a door closing somewhere I could not reach. I wanted to believe it was nothing. I wanted to believe that families do not draw lines when someone is doing the hardest work. I wanted to believe that proximity still meant inclusion. But each small exclusion added weight. A change to the cable account, a scheduled meeting I was told about afterward, a conversation that stopped when I entered the room. I told myself I was imagining it. Caregiving does that to you. It makes you sensitive, it makes you tired, it makes you doubt your own perceptions. At night, after my mother fell asleep, I sat at the kitchen table and organized. Bills in one stack, medical notes in another, emails archived by month. I did this because order was the only thing that kept the anxiety from spilling over. It never occurred to me that this habit, this quiet discipline, would one day matter for a reason far beyond my own sanity. By December, my mother began waking in the middle of the night, confused and afraid. I slept lightly, always listening, always ready. My world shrank to the sound of her footsteps and the creak of the hallway floor. I did not go anywhere. I did not make plans. I did not complain. I told myself this was what love looked like. When people asked how I was doing, I said fine. When Aaron said I should take a break, he did not offer to cover for me. When Paige posted about self-care and boundaries, I liked the photo and kept folding laundry. The truth is, I did not feel heroic. I felt useful, and useful people are rarely protected. As winter settled in, the doctor began using gentler words with heavier meanings. I nodded, I asked questions, I wrote everything down. I did not yet understand that there were conversations happening beyond my hearing, decisions being shaped without my voice. I believed that if something important were happening, someone would tell me. That belief was the last thing to go. The year turned quietly. My mother slept more. The house felt heavier. And somewhere between one appointment and the next, between one careful note and another, the foundation of my place in that family began to crack, even though I was still standing right there, holding everything up. Chapter 2: The Will That Silenced the Room. The cold bit through my coat as I stood there longer than I should have, staring at a house that no longer recognized me. I pulled my phone from my pocket and checked it out of habit, not because I expected a message. There was nothing from Grant, nothing from Sloan, just a notification reminding me of a medication refill I had scheduled for my mother weeks earlier, back when I still believed I was still needed. I walked down the steps slowly and sat in my car without turning the engine on. The interior smelled faintly like peppermint lozenges, the kind my mother liked to keep in her purse and forget about until they melted together. I pressed my forehead against the steering wheel and counted my breaths, the way a nurse once taught me during a particularly long night at the hospital. This was not how grief had been described to me. There were no sobs, no collapse, just a sharp, steady awareness that something fundamental had shifted. The meeting replayed itself in my mind, whether I wanted it to or not. The attorney's office had been too bright, the overhead lights unforgiving. Grant's posture had been relaxed, almost bored, like he was waiting for a contract to close. Sloane's voice had stayed soft the entire time, never rising, never cracking, each word placed carefully where it could not be accused of cruelty. I thought about the way the attorney read the will, how he never once looked up when he said the numbers out loud. $2.4 million reduced to a clean list of assets and beneficiaries. House, retirement accounts, insurance, all routed neatly to my brother. And then me, a single line, a smaller number, framed as generosity. The phrase substantial assistance echoed in my head. I tried to measure my life against it. The mornings I woke up before dawn to drive my mother to appointments, the nights I slept on the floor outside her bedroom because she was afraid to be alone, the career I stepped away from without ceremony. None of it fit neatly into that phrase. None of it seemed to count. My phone buzzed again, breaking the spiral. Another message from Sloan. "We just want to make this as smooth as possible. Mom hated conflict." I stared at the screen, my thumb hovering over the reply field. I wanted to ask her when my mother had said that. I wanted to ask if she had been there on the nights when my mother cried and apologized to me for being a burden. I wanted to ask who decided that smoothness mattered more than fairness. Instead, I locked the phone and placed it face down on the seat. I started the car and drove without thinking about where I was going, letting muscle memory take over. The streets blurred past, familiar and suddenly distant. At a stoplight, I caught my reflection in the rearview mirror. My face looked older than it had a week earlier, not from lines, but from something heavier settling behind my eyes. When I finally pulled into the parking lot of my apartment, it felt like stepping into a different life, a smaller one, quieter. No medical supplies stacked in the corner, no calendar filled with color-coded reminders. Just my space, untouched by anyone else's needs. Inside, I set the folder on the kitchen table and took off my coat. The silence pressed in. I made tea because that was what I did when I needed time to pass without falling apart. As the kettle heated, I opened the folder again and spread the documents out, smoothing each page, as if that might smooth the truth. The signature still bothered me. My mother had signed her name thousands of times over the years. Birthday cards, checks, permission slips. Her signature had always been bold, looping, unmistakably hers. This one looked hesitant, like someone guiding her hand or asking her to hurry. I remembered August of that year, the medication change, the way she slept through entire afternoons, the way she would repeat the same question every 10 minutes and then look embarrassed when she realized she had already asked it. I remembered asking Grant if we should postpone any legal paperwork until she was more stable. I remembered him telling me not to worry, that everything was under control. I sat down heavily in the chair and let that memory settle. Control. That was the word he liked. Control was what I had given up piece by piece without realizing it. My phone buzzed again, this time from Grant. "We need that receipt signed by the end of the week," he wrote. "The bank will not release funds until everything is finalized." I read the message twice. He was already talking about funds, already moving forward, already acting like the outcome was settled. I typed back slowly, "I need time." His reply came almost immediately. "Time for what? Everything is straightforward." I did not answer. Instead, I walked into the bedroom and opened the closet where I kept old boxes. I pulled one out at random and set it on the bed. Inside were notebooks, folders, old planners, years of my handwriting, my systems, my quiet record-keeping. I flipped through a notebook from 2 summers ago and found detailed notes from doctor visits, medication dosages, side effects, dates, times, observations. I did not know yet what I was looking for. I only knew that something was wrong, and that the proof, if it existed, would be in the details everyone else had ignored. As night settled in, I felt the weight of the day finally reach my shoulders. My mother was gone. My brother had stepped into her place without hesitation, and I had been pushed out of a life I had shaped with my own hands. I did not cry. I did not scream. I sat on the edge of my bed with the notebook open on my lap and felt something colder than grief settle into me. It was the understanding that I had been kind in a room where kindness was no longer currency, and that whatever came next would require a different kind of strength. Outside, a car alarm sounded briefly and then stopped. The world moved on, indifferent to my reckoning. I closed the notebook carefully and set it beside the folder on the table. I did not know yet what I would do, but I knew, with a clarity that surprised me, that I would not sign anything blindly again. Chapter 3. Silence became my only safe place. It was clarity, not relief, not courage, just a sharp understanding that silence could protect me better than any argument ever had. I stopped explaining myself after that. I stopped trying to correct the version of me that Grant and Sloane seemed determined to believe in. If they thought I was retreating, grieving, unraveling, I let them. It gave me room to breathe and room to see. My days became quiet and deliberate. I woke early, made coffee, and opened my laptop the way I once opened my mother's pill organizer, carefully, one compartment at a time. I stopped reacting and started observing. Every message from Grant went into a folder, every voicemail from the bank, every forwarded email from the attorney's office. I printed copies and highlighted dates. I cross-checked timelines the way I used to cross-check dosages. I was not looking for revenge. I was looking for coherence. August 2021 kept pulling at me like a loose thread. That month showed up everywhere, in the will, in the power of attorney, in pharmacy receipts and appointment confirmations. It was the month my mother stopped arguing, the month she smiled and nodded even when she did not fully understand what was being said to her. I opened my old notebooks and flipped to that section. I had written everything down back then because that was how I coped. August 3rd, new medication started. August 7th, excessive drowsiness. August 10th, confusion worse in afternoons. August 12th, asked if her parents were still alive. I sat back in my chair and closed my eyes. My mother had died believing she was sparing me stress. That thought hurt more than anything else so far. Grant texted again a few days later. "We still need that receipt signed. Please do not drag this out." I read it once and did not reply. I was done responding on their timeline. Instead, I called Peter Halston again. When he answered, his voice sounded strained, like he had been expecting the call. "Peter," I said, "I need the exact date the power of attorney was signed and the names of the witnesses." He sighed quietly. "Tessa, this is becoming contentious." "It became contentious when my mother lost her voice," I said. He cleared his throat. "The document was executed on August 11th at your mother's residence," he said. 2 firm associates were present. Names, I said again. There was a pause, long enough to feel deliberate. I will have to check what can be disclosed, he said. You already disclosed it happened at her home, I replied. You already disclosed who benefited. Silence. Peter spoke more softly. You should speak with your own counsel. I already am, I said. He hung up shortly after that. That same afternoon, Sloane showed up again, this time unannounced and uninvited, like she had not yet accepted that I was no longer playing the role she needed from me. She stood in my doorway with a tight smile and said she was worried. I let her in because I wanted to hear what she would say when she thought I was still off balance. She looked around my apartment like she was assessing damage. Grant thinks you are overwhelmed, she said. He asked me to check on you. I folded my arms. You can tell Grant I am fine. She tilted her head. You do not have to do this alone, she said. Mom trusted Grant to handle things. She was relieved when he stepped in. The word relieved landed again, just as sharp as before. Did she say that to you? I asked. Sloane hesitated for a fraction of a second. She did not use those exact words, she said, but it was obvious. She worried about you. She did not want you burdened. I looked at her steadily. She asked me every night if I was tired, I said. She apologized for being a burden to me. She cried because she felt guilty. Sloane's smile tightened. Grief can change memories, she said. No, I replied. Convenience does. Her eyes hardened then. You are making this more complicated than it needs to be. I stepped closer to the door and opened it. You need to leave, I said. She stared at me for a long moment, then picked up her purse. You are hurting everyone, she said as she walked past me. I closed the door behind her and locked it. That night, I drove past my mother's house again. I did not stop. I did not park. I just slowed enough to see the lights on inside, the curtains drawn. Grant was already living there, already settled into the space I had held together. I called Helen Price the next morning. She had been my mother's neighbor for years, close enough to notice things others missed. She answered on the first ring. Tessa, she said gently, did my mother ever talk to you about paperwork, about decisions being made for her? I asked. She was quiet for a moment. She did, she said. She told me she felt confused. She said people were asking her to sign things when she was tired. She said she trusted them, but she wished you were there when it happened. My throat tightened. Did she say who was asking? I asked. Helen sighed. She mentioned Grant and his wife, she said. She said they told her it was to help you, to protect you from stress. I sat very still. Thank you, I said. After I hung up, I went through my phone messages one by one, listening to old voicemails I had never deleted. Most were reminders, updates, small domestic notes. Then I found one marked draft unsent from a week before my mother died. I pressed play. My mother's voice was thin, uneven, like she was recording it in secret. Tessa, she said, if you hear this, I couldn't say it out loud. I'm sorry. You carried too much. I didn't mean that for you. I didn't want you left behind. Please believe that I saw you. I loved you. I slid down against the wall and sat on the floor, my hand over my mouth, the sound trapped inside my chest. When the message ended, the silence felt heavier than before, but it was different now. It had weight and meaning. The next day, I sat across from Dana Whitaker in her small office in Skokie. I laid everything out: the will, the power of attorney, my notes, the voicemail, the pharmacy receipts, the dates that did not line up. She listened without interrupting. When she finished, she nodded once. Do not confront them, not yet. We gather proof first. I felt something steady settle inside me. I signed the retainer agreement slowly, deliberately. For the first time since my mother died, I did not feel lost. I felt ready. Chapter 4. When Truth Spoke in a Quiet Room. It did not feel like a victory walking into the courthouse that morning. It felt like walking into a room where the air had been holding its breath for years. I arrived early, coat buttoned to my throat, my bag heavy with documents that no longer felt like paper, but like weight. The Cook County Courthouse rose in front of me, gray and unremarkable, a place where lives were reduced to timelines and signatures. Inside, the hallways smelled faintly of coffee and disinfectant. Claire Jennings met me near the courtroom doors. She nodded once, not smiling, not dramatic. "Stay exactly how you've been," she said quietly. "Let the record speak." Lucas and Brooke arrived minutes later with their legal team. Lucas looked confident, almost bored, like this was an inconvenience he expected to manage. Brooke wore a pale suit and a careful expression, the kind meant to signal composure. When her eyes met mine, she looked away first. The judge entered, everyone rose, and the room settled into a silence that felt earned. The opening arguments were predictable. Lucas's attorney framed me as emotional, overwhelmed by grief, unable to accept my mother's wishes. He spoke about family harmony, about how hard it is to watch siblings tear each other apart over money. Lucas nodded along at the right moments. Brooke kept her hands folded neatly, eyes lowered, the picture of restraint. When it was Claire's turn, she stood without flourish. "This is not a story about bitterness," she said. "This is a story about capacity, timing, and influence." She began with the medical records, dates, dosages, notes from neurologists describing confusion, disorientation, declining executive function. She laid out the timeline slowly, carefully, letting the judge see how tightly everything clustered around that late summer. Then she presented the power of attorney, the date, the witnesses, the context. Lucas's attorney objected. "Standard estate planning," he said. Claire nodded calmly. "Standard procedures still require informed consent," she replied. The judge leaned forward slightly. The voicemail came next. Claire warned the court before playing it. My mother's voice filled the room, thin and hesitant, apologizing for burdening me, saying she never wanted me pushed aside. The room stayed quiet. Lucas stared at the table. Brooke's jaw tightened. When the recording ended, the silence felt different. Not empty, heavy. Lucas's attorney stood again. "Hearsay," he said. The judge shook his head. "I'll allow it for context," he said. Claire moved on to the signatures. Enlarged copies displayed side by side. Older documents, steady, confident handwriting. Then the will and power of attorney, shaky, uneven, rushed. Lucas shifted in his seat. Then came the financial records. Claire projected a bank statement onto the screen. A transfer of $11,800 from Evelyn Carter's personal account to Lucas Carter's account, dated 2 days before the power of attorney was signed. Lucas's attorney stood abruptly. That was reimbursement, house expenses. Claire turned to him. "Then you won't mind explaining why the memo field is blank and why no corresponding invoice exists." Lucas finally looked up. "That money was mine," he said sharply. "My mother wanted it to have me." Claire did not argue. Instead, she turned to Brooke. "Mrs. Carter," she said, "you were present when these documents were signed." Brooke nodded. "Yes," she said. "Evelyn wanted it done." "Did Evelyn ask for the documents, or were they brought to her?" Brooke hesitated. "We discussed it." "With whom?" Claire asked. "With Lucas and me," Brooke replied, her voice tightening. "Did Evelyn understand she was granting full financial authority?" Claire asked. Brooke's composure cracked. "She trusted us," she said. "She didn't want Marin overwhelmed. She was relieved when Lucas stepped in."
The word landed hard in the room, relieved, the same word Brooke had used in my apartment months earlier. The judge looked up. "Mrs. Carter," he said, "please answer the question directly." Brooke swallowed. I don't know exactly what she understood. Lucas leaned toward his attorney, whispering urgently. Claire stepped back. "Your Honor," she said, "we are requesting an independent evaluation of Evelyn Carter's cognitive capacity at the time these documents were executed, based on medical records and witness testimony." The judge nodded slowly. "That will be ordered," he said. Lucas's confidence visibly faltered. His foot tapped against the floor. Brooke stared straight ahead, blinking rapidly. The session continued with testimony from a former home health aide who described Evelyn's confusion that summer, how she deferred questions to Lucas and Brooke, how she asked repeatedly when I would be back. Then Ruth Calder, Evelyn's neighbor, testified. "She told me she felt decisions were being made for her," Ruth said softly. "She said she didn't want to upset anyone." Lucas's attorney tried to discredit her. "She's a neighbor," he said, "not a professional." Ruth met his gaze. "I'm a witness," she said. "That's enough." By late afternoon, the room felt drained. No one had raised their voice. No one had cried. And yet everything had shifted. The judge called for a recess until the following week. People stood, papers rustled, conversations began in low voices. Lucas turned toward me as we exited the courtroom. "You didn't have to do this," he said. "We could have settled." I looked at him, really looked at him, for the first time in years. "You settled without me," I said. "I'm just telling the truth now." Brooke did not speak. Her face had gone pale, the careful control gone. She clutched her bag like it was the only solid thing left. Outside, the late afternoon light felt too bright. My legs shook as the adrenaline drained away. Claire touched my arm gently. "You did exactly what you needed to," she said. I nodded, though exhaustion pressed down on me harder than relief ever could. As I drove to my car, I realized something quietly important. No one had shouted. No one had accused me of greed or selfishness. The truth had spoken in documents, in dates, in voices that did not need to perform. I sat in the driver's seat for a long moment before starting the engine. My hands rested on the wheel, steady but tired. Whatever came next would take time, more hearings, more waiting. But for the first time since my mother died, the story was no longer being told without me. I drove home in silence, the city moving around me as it had always, knowing the fight was not over, but something fundamental had changed.
Chapter 5. I didn't win. I survived. Because I stopped holding it together, everything else finally had room to fall where it belonged. The decision arrived on a Tuesday morning that looked like any other. Gray sky, light rain tapping against the kitchen window, my coffee cooling beside me as I stared at emails I had already read twice. When my phone rang and I saw Claire Jennings' name, I did not rush to answer. I already knew this call would not sound the way victories do in movies. It would be quieter than that. Her voice was calm when she spoke. "The court has issued its final ruling," she said. "The August 2021 will has been declared invalid. Undue influence. Lack of cognitive capacity. The estate will revert to the prior will in full." I thanked her. The words came out automatically, polite, practiced. After we hung up, I sat very still, my hands resting flat on the table. Nothing surged through me. No rush of triumph, no urge to cry. Just a slow, spreading sense of release, like muscles unclenching after years of tension I had forgotten how to name. It was over. The legal consequences unfolded quickly. Accounts were restructured, titles were corrected. The system moved with a kind of indifferent efficiency that felt almost cruel after so much waiting. Lucas lost access first. Banks froze transfers. Meetings were postponed.
Deals he had once closed with ease stalled without explanation. In his world, uncertainty is fatal, and word travels fast. No one accused him publicly. No one needed to. His name began to carry hesitation. Clients stopped returning calls. Colleagues became distant. Invitations softened into excuses. He had not been destroyed, he had been reclassified. Brooke disappeared from public view even faster. Her online presence went dark. Comments vanished. Partnerships quietly dissolved. When a brand is built on credibility and control, cracks travel quickly once the story no longer aligns with the image. I did not hear from her again. I did not need to. Claire asked me if I wanted to pursue additional claims, fees, sanctions, compensation for the years I had given without pay. I considered it carefully. No, I said. I'm finished. She nodded, like she understood exactly what that meant. The house was sold not long after. I did not attend the closing. I did not want to walk those rooms again with strangers measuring spaces where my mother had once stood, confused but trying to smile. My portion of the estate transferred quietly. Numbers appeared in my account that finally reflected something tangible. Still, when I saw them, I felt nothing like satisfaction. Money settles things. It does not heal them. On a cold afternoon a few weeks later, I drove to the lake. It was empty in that late winter way, gray water stretching toward a horizon that did not ask anything of me. I walked the path slowly, hands buried in my coat pockets, letting the cold sting my face. I thought about my mother, about the woman she had been before fear narrowed her world, about the voicemail she left me, apologizing for carrying too much and leaving too little protection behind. I let myself hold the full truth now. She loved me. She also failed me. Both things could exist without canceling each other out. For a long time, I believed survival meant choosing one story and burying the rest. I was wrong. Healing came when I stopped editing. I saw Lucas once more, months later, in a grocery store parking lot. He looked smaller somehow, his confidence worn thin at the edges. He hesitated when he saw me, then walked over like he had rehearsed the moment. "I didn't think it would end like this," he said. I believed him. He had never thought beyond his own assumptions. "I didn't either," I said. There was nothing else to add. He nodded once and walked away. I did not watch him leave. My life now is quieter than it has ever been. Not empty, just intentional. I work again, consulting on my own terms, choosing projects that do not require me to disappear to make them function. I sleep through the night. I answer calls because I want to, not because I feel responsible for holding everything together. The hardest boundary was not with my family, it was with myself. Learning not to step forward automatically. Learning that love does not require self-erasure. Learning that being capable does not mean being obligated. I did not win in the way people imagine winning. I did not walk away triumphant or unscarred. What I gained was something far less dramatic and far more valuable. Peace that does not depend on approval, stability that does not come from sacrifice, a life that does not require me to shrink to fit someone else's comfort. Sometimes I listen to my mother's voicemail again, not because it hurts, but because it reminds me that even imperfect love can leave behind something honest. I forgive her where I can. I forgive myself for staying silent as long as I did. I did not win, I survived. And if you are listening to this and recognize the quiet I lived in for so long, understand this. Silence is not weakness. Sometimes it is strategy. Sometimes it is grief. Sometimes it is the only place where clarity can grow without being crushed. Evidence matters. Truth does not need to shout to stand its ground. If you have ever been pushed aside, underestimated, or told to accept less because you were strong enough to endure it, you are not imagining the imbalance. You are not wrong for wanting your story told accurately. If this story stayed with you, if it felt familiar in a way you did not expect, I invite you to stay a little longer. Share your thoughts. These quiet stories do not need applause, but they do deserve to be heard.